Home alone, you'll wish you weren't. Welcome back to another chilling episode, my fellow night owls. Tonight we delve into the darkness that lingers within the supposed safety of our homes. Today we dive into 3 true disturbing home alone horror stories that will make you think twice about staying home alone. Lock your doors, turn on the lights, and prepare to be disturbed because these stories are all too real. Our first story takes us to a quiet suburban home, where 20-year-old Sarah found herself home alone on a Friday night. Her parents were out of town, her friends were busy, and a storm raged outside, trapping her inside with the unsettling silence of the empty house. As the wind howled outside, Sarah decided to watch a movie, seeking comfort in the flickering light of the television. But as the night wore on, a subtle sound pricked at the edges of her awareness. It was a soft thud, like something heavy being dragged across the basement floor.
She paused the movie, her heart quickening as she strained to hear. Silence. Maybe it was just the wind, she thought, trying to rationalize the sound. She returned to her movie, but the unsettling feeling remained, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Minutes later, another thud, this time louder, more insistent. It was definitely coming from the basement.
Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Sarah's attempts to rationalize the noise. Her mind raced, conjuring images of horror movie villains lurking in the shadows. Mustering her courage, Sarah decided to investigate. Armed with only a flashlight, she crept towards the basement door, each step echoing in the silence. The air grew colder as she descended the creaking wooden stairs, the smell of damp earth filling her nostrils. The basement was dark, the shadows stretching and twisting like living things. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs, her flashlight beam dancing nervously across the cluttered space.
She scanned the room, her breath catching in her throat as she noticed a heavy toolbox lying on its side, tools scattered around it as if it had been knocked over. Suddenly, a scraping noise, close and sharp, cut through the silence. It was coming from behind the old, dusty shelves lining the far wall. Sarah froze, her blood turning to ice. She slowly turned, her flashlight beam illuminating the space between the shelves and the wall. There, pressed between the shelves and the wall, was a figure, a tall, shadowy figure with eyes that glinted in the dim light. Sarah gasped, her flashlight falling from her trembling hand, plunging the basement into darkness. Panic seized her. She scrambled back, her foot catching on a loose floorboard, sending her tumbling to the cold, hard floor. As she lay there, her heart pounding in her chest, she heard a slow, deliberate dragging sound coming towards her. Screaming, Sarah scrambled to her feet and ran, her bare feet slapping against the concrete steps. She slammed the basement door shut behind her, the sound echoing through the house. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached her bedroom, where she barricaded the door with furniture, her entire body trembling. She spent the rest of the night huddled in her room, the terrifying events replaying in her mind. The next morning, when her parents returned home, they found the basement empty, the toolbox back in its place, the tools neatly arranged. To this day, Sarah can't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking in her basement that night. Something that watched her, something that waited.
Our next story takes us to a seemingly ordinary home in a bustling city, where a man named David experienced a series of unsettling events. David's family was away on a week-long vacation, leaving him alone in their quiet suburban home. The first night, as David settled in, the phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, but the number was unfamiliar. He hesitated, a prickle of unease running down his spine. He wasn't expecting any calls, and the unfamiliar number filled him with a sense of foreboding. Deciding to ignore it, David let the call go to voicemail, but the phone rang again and again, amplifying his unease.
Curiosity, mixed with dread, finally compelled him to answer. Hello? David's voice was hesitant, a tremor of apprehension in his tone. Silence. There was no response, only a faint static hiss. Hello? Who is this? David repeated, his voice louder, irritation creeping in.
A soft, raspy chuckle, barely audible, sent chills down David's spine. It was a chilling sound, devoid of humor, laced with something cold and menacing. Fear tightened its grip on David's chest. He hung up the phone, his heart pounding in his ears. He tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, attributing the call to a prankster or a wrong number. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, whispering of something more sinister. Over the next few nights, the calls persisted, each one following the same chilling pattern. The unfamiliar number would flash on his caller ID, followed by the same eerie silence, the same faint static hiss, and that same bone-chilling chuckle. David tried everything to stop the calls. He blocked the number, but the calls still came through. He contacted his phone company, but they couldn't offer any explanation. The calls became a terrifying nightly ritual, chipping away at his sanity.
One night, driven to the edge by fear and frustration, David decided to confront the voice on the other end. As soon as the phone clicked, before the silence could stretch and the chuckle could send shivers down his spine, he spoke, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the silence of the house. "What do you want?"
The response, when it came, was not a chuckle, but a voice, a whisper that slithered into his ear like a venomous snake. "You can't escape me!" the voice hissed, each word laced with malice. "I'm already inside!" David slammed the phone down, his blood turning to ice. He searched the house, his heart pounding in his chest, but he was alone. Or so he thought. The calls stopped after that night, but the fear remained, a constant shadow lurking at the edge of David's awareness. He never found out who was behind those terrifying calls, but he knew, deep down, that the voice on the other end was something truly evil, something that had found its way into his home, into his mind. Chapter 3: The Face in the Window. Our final story takes us to the rural outskirts of town, where a 16-year-old named Emily experienced a terrifying encounter that left her questioning her sanity.
Emily's parents were attending an overnight conference, leaving her alone in their secluded farmhouse. As darkness fell, casting long, eerie shadows across the fields surrounding the house, I found myself feeling increasingly isolated. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, and the silence inside the house was broken only by the creaking of the old farmhouse settling around me.
Seeking comfort, Emily curled up on the living room couch with a book, the warm glow of a nearby lamp her only companion in the growing darkness. But as the hours passed, a growing sense of unease settled over her.
I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched, my every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled with a sudden chill, and I found myself constantly glancing towards the windows, my heart quickening with each gust of wind that rattled the panes.
Later that night, as Emily was preparing for bed, she glanced out her bedroom window, her gaze drawn to the darkness that pressed against the glass. The old oak tree at the edge of the yard swayed ominously in the wind, its branches casting grotesque shadows that danced across the lawn, and that's when she saw it.
A face. A pale, gaunt face with eyes that glinted in the darkness, staring directly at me from the shadows beneath the oak tree. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding against my ribs. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what my eyes were seeing. The face remained, its features twisted into a grotesque mockery of a smile, its eyes boring into me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine.
Terror, raw and consuming, washed over Emily. She stumbled back from the window, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream.
I fumbled for the light switch, bathing the room in a warm, reassuring glow. But when I looked back, the face was gone.
Emily spent the rest of the night huddled in her bed, every creak of the house, every gust of wind that rattled the windows, sending a fresh wave of terror through her. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, a trick of the light and shadows, but deep down, she knew what she had seen.
The next morning, when my parents returned home, I told them about the face in the window. They tried to reassure me, attributing my experience to an overactive imagination fueled by the isolation and the darkness. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew that the face in the window, with its malevolent gaze and chilling smile, would forever haunt my nightmares.
The experience left an indelible mark on Emily. a constant reminder that even in the supposed safety of our homes, darkness can lurk just outside, watching, waiting for the opportune moment to break through. Remember, these stories are based on true events, reminding us that even in the familiar comfort of our homes, darkness can lurk. Stay safe, and always be aware of your surroundings, for you never know what might be lurking just beyond your perception. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.